It was an autumn evening in the small town of Willow Creek. The residents were busy preparing for the upcoming harvest festival, a tradition that had been passed down for generations. The streets were filled with the sweet aroma of pumpkin spice and the sound of children's laughter. But amidst the festive atmosphere, a sense of unease settled in the hearts of the townspeople. It had been 20 years since the infamous Hatch Massacre on Potato Hill, a tragedy that had left an indelible mark on the town's history. The memory of the event still lingered, a constant reminder of the horrors that had unfolded on that fateful night. Many believed that the killer had been a stranger, someone who had stumbled upon the family's farm and had committed the heinous crime in a fit of rage. But others whispered that the killer was still living among them, hiding in plain sight. The thought sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest residents, and the townspeople couldn't help but wonder if they would ever truly be able to put the past behind them. Rumors and speculations had circulated for years, but the truth remained elusive. The townspeople had tried to move on, to rebuild and recover from the trauma. But the memory of the Hatch family lingered, a constant reminder of the horrors that had unfolded on that fateful night. For Emily Maynard, a young and ambitious journalist, the Hatch Massacre was more than just a tragic event. It was a story that had haunted her since childhood, a mystery that she was determined to solve. Emily had grown up in Willow Creek, listening to the hushed whispers of her parents and neighbors. She had always been fascinated by the case, poring over old news articles and police reports. As she grew older, her curiosity only deepened. She began to ask questions, to investigate on her own. And now, as a journalist, she saw an opportunity to finally shed some light on the dark secrets that had haunted the town for so long. Emily started by interviewing the locals, gathering as much information as she could about the Hatch family and the events leading up to the massacre. She spoke to the old police chief, now retired, who had handled the case. She talked to the neighbors who had lived nearby at the time, and she scoured the archives, looking for any clues that might have been missed. But the more she dug, the more she realized that the truth was not going to be easy to uncover. People seemed reluctant to talk, to share their memories of that night. Some claimed they had seen nothing, heard nothing. Others spoke of a stranger, a person they had seen lurking around the farm. But the descriptions were always vague, always contradictory. Emily began to suspect that the townspeople were hiding something, that they knew more than they were letting on. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led on a wild goose chase, that the truth was being hidden from her. One person, however, seemed willing to talk. Her name was Margaret, an elderly woman who had lived next door to the Hatch family. Margaret had always been reclusive, preferring to keep to herself. But as Emily approached her, she noticed a hint of warmth in the woman's eyes. Margaret invited Emily in, offered her a cup of tea, and began to talk. At first, her words were sparse, guarded, but as the tea flowed and the afternoon sun dipped low, she opened up. She spoke of the Hatch family, of their kindness and generosity. She remembered the children, 2 young boys, who would often play in her garden, and she recalled the parents, hardworking and devoted. But as the night of the massacre drew near, Margaret's words faltered. She seemed to be struggling with her memories, as if the pain of recalling them was too great to bear. There was a knock on the door, and Margaret's expression changed. She glanced nervously at Emily, as if she had said too much. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Margaret got up, excused herself, and disappeared into the hallway. Emily was left alone, wondering what was happening. And then she heard the voices. They were hushed, urgent. Emily strained to listen, to make out what was being said. But the words were indistinguishable. She knew that she was onto something, that Margaret was hiding a secret. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the conversation stopped. Margaret returned, her face pale, her eyes clouded. "I'm sorry, dear," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I've said too much already." Emily pressed her, trying to extract more information. But Margaret was resolute, her jaw set. It was as if she had revealed too much, and now was determined to keep the rest to herself. As Emily left Margaret's house, she felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew that she had scratched the surface of something much deeper, much darker. The townspeople were hiding something, and she was determined to uncover the truth. But as she walked back to her car, she noticed something odd. A figure was watching her, standing in the shadows. It was a man, tall and imposing. Emily couldn't see his face, but she felt a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to be tracking her every move. She quickened her pace, her heart racing, and as she reached her car, she turned back to look. The man was gone, vanished into thin air. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unblinking eyes were trained on her. She knew that she had to be careful, that she was playing with fire, but she refused to back down, to let fear take over. For the next few days, Emily couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. She began to wonder if she had stirred up something, if she had awakened a sleeping giant. But she refused to back down, to let fear take over. She continued her investigation, poring over old records, talking to more people. And then, just when she thought she was getting nowhere, she received a cryptic message. It was a note, left on her car windshield. "Look again at the past," it read. "The truth is hidden in plain sight." Emily was both terrified and intrigued. Who was sending her these messages, and what did they want her to see? She thought back to the Hatch family, to the night of the massacre. And then a realization dawned on her. She had been looking at the case all wrong, focusing on the killer, on the motive. But what if the truth lay with the family itself? What if there was a dark secret, something that had driven the killer to commit such a heinous crime? Emily's mind was racing now, the pieces clicking into place. She began to see the Hatch family in a new light, as more than just innocent victims. She saw them as complex people with secrets and lies, and she realized that the key to the mystery lay in understanding them, in uncovering the truth about their lives. She started to dig deeper, to research the family's history, and what she found shocked her to the core. The Hatch family had been hiding a dark secret, something that had driven the killer to commit such a heinous crime. But what was it? Emily was determined to find out. The symbol, it turned out, was an old pagan mark, used by a secret cult that had operated in the area. The cult had been thought to be long disbanded, but Emily suspected that it still existed, hiding in plain sight. And at the center of it all, the killer, a person who had been driven by a twisted ideology. The motive, it turned out, was not revenge or greed. It was something far more sinister. The killer, Emily discovered, was not a stranger. It was someone who had been close to the Hatch family, someone who had been welcomed into their home. And the reason for the massacre, it was not a simple act of violence. It was a twisted sacrifice, a ritual that had been performed to satisfy a dark and malevolent force. As Emily delved deeper into the case, she began to uncover more and more evidence of the cult's existence. She found symbols etched into the walls of old buildings, and she discovered hidden rooms and secret passages. It was as if the cult had been hiding in plain sight, leaving clues and hints for anyone who was brave enough to follow them. And Emily was determined to follow them, no matter where they led. She knew that she was getting close to the truth, and she was willing to risk everything to uncover it. But as she dug deeper, Emily began to realize that she was not alone. She was being watched, and not just by the figure in the shadows. There were others, people who were tracking her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. Emily knew that she had to be careful, that one misstep could be fatal. But she refused to back down, to let fear take over. She was determined to expose the cult, to bring them to justice, and she was willing to risk everything to do it. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's investigation began to attract attention. The local police department started to take notice, and they began to investigate Emily's claims. But Emily knew that she couldn't trust them, that they were likely compromised by the cult. She had to go it alone, to rely on her own wits and resources. And so she continued to dig, to uncover more and more evidence of the cult's existence. She was getting close to the truth, and she knew it. The closer Emily got to the truth, the more she realized that she was in grave danger. The cult was not just a group of crazy people. It was a highly organized and well-funded organization, and they would stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. Emily knew that she had to be careful, that one misstep could be fatal. But she refused to back down, to let fear take over. She was determined to expose the cult, to bring them to justice, and she was willing to risk everything to do it. As Emily pieced together the final moments of the Hatch family's lives, she realized that she had stumbled into something much larger than she had ever imagined. The cult, it seemed, was just the tip of the iceberg. There was something far more sinister at play, something that threatened the very fabric of society. Emily knew that she had to act fast, to expose the truth before it was too late. And so she wrote her story, pouring all of her findings into a single article. It was a story that would shake the foundations of the town, a story that would change everything. And then, just as Emily was about to publish her story, she received a final message. It was a note, left on her doorstep. "You'll never tell," it read. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized that she was in grave danger. The cult had found her, and they would stop at nothing to silence her. But Emily refused to back down, to let fear take over. She published her story, and she waited for the fallout. She knew that she had done the right thing, that she had exposed a great evil, and she was willing to face the consequences, no matter what they might be.